From the way she's been hiding where no one would expect her, to the air of secrecy around her casting, here's how Dune 2 will finally introduce the weirdest character. In a way, she's been with us this whole time, but no one, not even the characters, know it. See, Lady Jessica hasn't realized it yet, stressed as she is by everything that's going on, but she's actually about to have a baby girl. What's weird about that? There are things to come in Dune Part 2 that'll change baby Aelia Atreides before she's even born. Before we get to Aelia, we have to talk about an important plot point for Jessica, who's about to get a bit of a power-up in the Dune sequel. If you need a refresher, the Bene Gesserit are a sisterhood of science fiction witches, and the most powerful among them are called Reverend Mothers. They have extra powers that even the regular sisters don't have. To become a Reverend Mother, a sister of the Bene Gesserit has to go through something called the Spice Agony, a ritual where they drink the water of life, which is the Freeman's name for the bile of a drowned sandworm. Knowing that the sisterhood's part of the Harkonnen conspiracy to destroy House Atreides, Jessica will drink the water of life, and through a physically and mentally painful transformation, become a Reverend Mother.
She was my teacher at the Bene Gesserit school. She's now truthsayer to the Emperor himself. She would like to meet you.
Why?
She wants to know about your dreams.
Keep in mind that when someone's pregnant, the baby gets a little bit of whatever the mom eats or drinks, and so baby Aelia has the strange honor of being born a Reverend Mother. All this is combined with the fact that, thanks to the breeding program, Jessica has genes that can create the Kwisatz Haderach, and while there can be only one of those in the universe, Paul's siblings are likely to end up with some of those genes. Clearly, this isn't a normal pregnancy, and when Aelia's born, she won't be a normal baby. Reverend Mothers have access to all the memories of their female ancestors, which means that when Aelia's born, she'll be a smart cookie. In the novel, at just 2 years old, she's already a talker and has to pretend to be a little girl to avoid upsetting people, even though she's wiser than anyone on Arrakis. This makes her an abomination in the eyes of the Bene Gesserit, and the Sisterhood usually kills abominations as soon as they can. But Jessica isn't on their side anymore, is she? One of the risks children like Aelia face is that, because they can see the memories of their ancestors, they're also exposed to their personalities. Adult Reverend Mothers can control the influence of these personalities, but children don't really have personalities of their own, and that means they can be mentally dominated by the ghost of an ancestor.
But you in your pride thought you could produce the Kwisatz Haderach.
Was I wrong?
You're lucky he didn't die in that room. If he is the one, he has a long way to go. His sight is barely awakened, and now he goes into the fire.
I told you this was going to get weird. Luckily, Aelia's special, and she manages to form her own personality, one that sometimes clashes with those of her mom and brother. So let's talk a little bit about what her storyline could look like in the movies, starting with Dune Part 2, which will adapt whatever's left of the first novel. Unless you're Macaulay Culkin, being a smart baby won't help you when big men with weapons come to kidnap you. And that's what happens to the 4-year-old Aelia during a Sardaukar raid on Sietch Tabr. She's presented to the Emperor, who's freaked out by, everything. Rescuing her is a big reason why Paul, whose Freeman army's stronger than ever, finally decides to take the fight to Harkonnens in Arrakeen. In the midst of the chaos at the palace, Aelia proves that she's more dangerous than anyone expected, as she personally poisons Big Bad Vlad with a Gom Jabbar before sneaking through the palace and stabbing everyone else with a Christ knife. Thanks to her body count, the Fremen would eventually call her Saint Aelia of the Knife. After the Atreides defeat the Harkonnens, Aelia reveals that she has a weaker form of Paul's prescience, but unlike Paul, she can use that prescience to talk to people in their minds. Don't ask me to explain how that works because I don't have Frank Herbert's stash of drugs. Now, Denis Villeneuve said that he wants to adapt Dune Messiah, the second novel, into a movie too. If that happens, here's how you can expect Paul and Aelia's story to continue.
They say you're the Mahdi, but you look like a little boy. You chose the hardest way up. Follow me.
Messiah finds our young hero out of the war zone and trying to rule Arrakis, and because Alia is so smart, she naturally becomes one of his most trusted advisors. But on the side, she also finds love, though in line with her weird vibes. The person she falls in love with is a clone of Paul's old mentor, Duncan Idaho. Together with Duncan 2.0, she works to bust the schemes against Paul. But things don't work out too swimmingly, and Paul eventually loses his eyesight and his vision of the future, and he's forced to walk off into the desert and die, or does he? With her brother out of the picture, Aaliyah becomes the ruler of Arrakis. And that brings us to Children of Dune, which you could read, or you could check out the sci-fi adaptation from 2003. As Queen of Arrakis, Aaliyah has to run the whole shebang basically by herself, while also raising Paul and Chani's children to not be little troublemakers. But her abomination's getting stronger, and she becomes more vulnerable to the ghosts of her ancestors that are in her mind. Eventually, none other than Big Bad Vlad, who's Aaliyah's granddad, starts possessing her and turning her into a troublemaker herself. Vlad's influence pits Aaliyah against Jessica, who spent a bunch of time on Caladan but returned to Dune after the death of her son. By the end of the book, Aaliyah completely loses control of her mental ghosts and has no choice but to jump out of a window and take herself off the board, leaving Paul's kids to figure things out from there. All things considered, Aaliyah's storyline throughout the Dune novels is similar to Paul's, since she has great power that she tries to wield in a responsible way. But in the end, those powers get the best of her, and both of Jessica's children are ultimately too strong to be left alive. If you thought that the books were weird and tragic enough, you ain't seen nothing yet, but I'll let you discover the back half of Herbert's series on your own. For now, I want to turn my attention to an important question. How do you make this character work on screen? In Dune Part 2, Aaliyah would be 4 years old tops, but she's supposed to act like an adult. There are ways to make that work on screen, but Denis cares a lot about the little details, so that limits his options. One option would be to create Aaliyah completely with CGI, and companies like Disney have shown that the tech for doing so has come a long way, but I wouldn't expect a director who shot the entire movie in an actual desert to go for something like that. A bolder possibility would be to write her out of the story, but if Denis likes Dune as much as the fans do, he'd sooner quit the project. Plus, if he wants to do Dune Messiah in the future, he needs to introduce Aaliyah in his movie. The last option's probably the best one. Do what David Lynch did. In his movie, he shifted the timeline around to make Aaliyah a bit older, and he wound up casting a 9-year-old Alicia Witt in the role. The only hitch here is that Dennis would have to mess with the timeline, but that could be the least offensive way of bringing Aaliyah to the screen.
Some things, though, are crystal clear. I can feel it. I know you're pregnant.
So what did he end up doing? I wish I could tell you, but the casting of Aaliyah's been one of the movie's best kept secrets. Shooting for the movie wrapped in December of 2022, and they've even released 2 trailers for the movie, but there's a lot that somehow managed to stay on the down low. For example, Tim Blake Nelson is in the movie too, and no one knows for sure what his role's gonna be. Before someone suggests he's playing Aaliyah, some dreams just have to remain dreams, I'm afraid. At this point, her importance to the story's the only reason we can be sure that Aaliyah's even in the movie, because the people behind the movie haven't said anything about it. Now that the Screen Actors Guild's on strike, the actress playing Aaliyah might not even be allowed to take part in any big reveals. I guess we won't know how the character's gonna work in this movie until it comes out, which means waiting till November of 2023. So there you have it. From the mystery behind her casting, to the way she's hidden in the shadows so far. That's how Dune 2 will finally introduce the weirdest character.